So Steve and I are getting ready to throw a valve cover gasket on an 04 Jeep Grand Cherokee. This procedure should be the same on a 99 to 04 Jeep Grand Cherokee, the 4.0 motor in it. Before we get started, remember to subscribe to the channel, ring the bell, and subscribe to all of our notifications. That way you'll get a heads up when we upload a new video.
All right, so we're going to change the valve cover gasket on this thing today, and a couple things that I do. We're going to remove the air cleaner assembly, the ductwork over here. It's got a 10 millimeter over here we've already loosened up and taken out. We'll sit that up here. I'm going to disconnect the hose over here. We're going to pull the ductwork and everything out of the way, and we're going to take the bracket with the cables for the accelerator pedal and the transmission shifter cable. We're going to disconnect those and take the two 10 millimeter bolts out from the bracket and take the bracket as an assembly out of the way. This off, pull this out. So we got a 10 over here. Hold the lever and push the shifter things gently to pop them off. Same thing with this one. And this one just pops back out like that. Now we take the bracket. We can keep these popped in here if we want. With the screwdriver, we'll pop this tab off here, and these will all stay in place. And we're going to pull the whole assembly out of the way. Just take this one more 10 millimeter off over here. You got a 3/8 ratchet for that. So we've got our assembly pulled out of the way, and we can tuck this all back up here out of the way. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bungee cord and hook it to the wiper blade, so it stays pulled up out of my way. Now the vent tube on the valve cover here, you try and take it off on this side. This thing seems to break all the time, so we're going to gently try and remove it from this side here, and it comes right up. And this is kind of the point of least resistance here. So we'll tuck that underneath here, and we're going to leave this. Now this plastic piece here, we can get a screwdriver and pop that up. Set that up there. I'm going to keep this in line with the valve cover so it's kind of out of my way. And we're going to bungee this up to the windshield wiper arm. So now the valve cover is pretty much exposed. He's already replaced his vent hose on this, and these are common for splitting. And this is just a 1/2 inch inside diameter hose that you can use to replace it. And all the screws, the bolts that hold this thing down are 7/16. Now you have this fuel rail harness here, and we have to gently lift this up and slide them off of the bolts. And we're going to use a tool to wedge these up and just roll this out of the way. A lot of the engines have the heat shield on it. This one, the heat shield is missing, so we don't have to worry about that. The heat shield is usually just like a piece of almost looks like thick aluminum foil, but that's missing. So we're going to use a little pry bar to roll these up and get these all up to pull these out of the way, because they're going to be covering the valve cover. This is all plastic, so you kind of got to be gentle with it. Like back there. Yep. And we're going to get a pry bar for that one, a long one, to pop that one up. looks like we got this all loose, and we can just keep this floating here out of the way. We can get a little tie wrap to pull it. So we're gonna secure this cable right here and this, and we'll show you how that's all secured. All right, so we got the harness for the fuel injectors, the plastic clips. Now these are kind of brittle, so we use like a crow's foot to get underneath them to start them. And then the very last one, we use the pry bar on the stud right here and got underneath it and lifted it up gently to get them all off. You don't want to break this stuff. And so we have the hose, we have the accelerator pedal cable bungeed up out of the way. We're going to disconnect our hoses here. Now this has a little thing that comes off on the stud here, and this one just fell off here. This sleeve goes inside the plastic tube here. We'll set this up here. Now, on the back side of the valve cover over here, we're gonna pull these hoses up out of the way and tuck them up over here so that these will end up being out of the way of the valve cover. So we can tie wrap these too. Now, this plastic piece in the corner here, supposed to have some tie wraps on it, and it's just kind of floating here, so I'm not sure if someone's been in here or not, but these are all 7/16 to take out, and this plastic piece is very important to put back in because it holds the harness away from the back of the valve cover. So we're going to take this off, and then I'm going to show you how to put tie wraps back on this before we do the reinstall, so that this thing will hold the harness up, tie wrapped up out of the way. It looks like there's one tie wrap still right here, but I think this one is broken. So we'll get this apart. I'm gonna tie these up, and we'll just leave these tie wrapped up out of the way. Okay. All right, I'm gonna just remove the dipstick, just get it out of my way. Over here, we have the tie wrap pulled, so the hoses are up out of the way. Now we're going to get the 7/16. I have a little quarter drive air ratchet. I'm going to use to pop these off. You can take them off by hand. Sometimes these nuts get locked onto the stud, and the whole stud will come out with it. If it does, we'll pull them out as an assembly. We have to cut this tie wrap right here. We're going to get some side cutters and cut this, and we're going to remove this plastic piece first. And this is probably the crappiest part of the whole job. There is one bolt in the back side of the valve cover where my finger is right here down below. That's kind of tough to get at it, but once this piece is off, the harness, you can float the harness around and get in there. So I'm going to get the air ratchet set up, and we're going to start removing these. Now, you guys all have phones to take pictures. Use it. Put all your studs back in the same position. You want to put this job back together the same way you took it apart. So on this side, we have studs all the way up until the very last one's here. And then on this side, you have only certain ones that have studs. So we're gonna mark them to make sure we put them all back together the same way. We can mark the valve cover with a paint stick, whatever you wanna do, but make sure that you put it back together the right way. All right, we're gonna start unbolting the valve cover now, and we'll start the front, and we got a pan here. We'll get everything put in here. We put paint marks on the valve covers for where the studs go. So this side, the studs start from here all the way to the back. So I just threw a couple paint marks there, and we put a couple paint marks. There's only 2 studs on the other side. So the 2 with the cover for the plastic cover. All right, now the nut came off of this one. The last one I did a couple of weeks ago did not. The whole stud came out with it, so that's good. So we're gonna second one, the stud came out with it. We're gonna cut this tie wrap right here, and we're gonna remove the plastic piece right now. Cut this tie wrap. Okay. So this should have 2 tie wraps on it. It gets one here to hold the harness down, and it gets another one here. This one was missing. So, and like I said, the stud comes out with this. So you can put this in the, grab this with vice grips, and then we'll take this stud off in a few minutes. Right now we're gonna get the rest of the valve cover bolts out.
Are you okay right here, or do you need to come over?
Oh, that's good.
Okay.
This side's all wet, so this thing is definitely leaking on this side here.
You can smell the oil on it.
All right, now we're getting down to the last couple that are gonna suck. So we have 2 that are in the back of the cover, one that's in the back of the cover, and this last one that we can get, the last easy one. This one. We got one in the front here we gotta get. So there's one opposite of this one that's in the front that's in the back over here. And we're gonna try and get this air ratchet set up back there so that we can try and take it off. The harness moves around here now. And you have to get on that last bolt down here, and the ratchets, the socket fits on. I have to get a real stubby extension to fit on this thing. And we may take this one out by hand. Let me get a shorter extension, quarter drive extension. All right, let's get the socket with the shorter extension back on it. Get it on there. And I'm gonna try and get the air ratchet in here. I wanna make sure I don't drop that bolt. And I almost dropped it. All right, so we should have all the bolts out. We're gonna double check right now to make sure they're all out. Looks like everything's all out. Cover's loose. I tilt the cover to the right a little to get it to shave out, to sneak out like this. Now all of these little plugs, you end up prying these up and you get new ones with the valve cover. these all come out. And this is going to take a little time to remove all of these. And you have to separate the metal washer from the rubber, because these metal washers are reusable. So we'll get into that in a minute. We're going to get this cover all cleaned up, and we'll start removing these metal washers, and then we're going to clean the valve cover. So if we set this aside, we're going to go and remove that gasket right now. Okay, so we got the old gasket here, and we're going to get it, lift it up. It's got a couple of things that holds it on, a couple of studs from the cylinder head. And here's the old gasket. It only goes on one way. It's got the slots right here to line it back up. And over time, this rubber in this gasket just deteriorates and it breaks down. Now, the little caps that we showed you in the valve cover, they're only going to let you tighten the valve cover down a certain amount. So it's not like you're going to over-tighten this thing. You want to just tighten them up snug, and that's going to be good. It kind of takes the idiocy out of it. So just snug them up good and you'll be good. Now, we're going to clean all of our surface here, bone dry. Like, this all has to get super clean. So we're going to get this all cleaned up. We'll come back and show you that. And then we'll start laying the new gasket on. And on the valve cover over here, we're going to start removing these caps, which are all in your valve cover here. We're going to remove all of these, and then we're going to separate. See how they're starting to separate here? We need to get these old rubber O-rings, or seals if you will, off of these caps. And, you know, we'll run these up on the wire wheel just to clean them up. It's really not too necessary. But here's where the time is. You're going to be removing these one at a time, separating these, cleaning them up, and then in the new valve cover gasket, you get a package. You get a package of new ones. And they only go on, you know, pretty much one way. They go on where this sits into the valve cover, and then you'll slide your cap into it. So we're going to wire wheel these all up and clean them up, clean up the valve cover gasket, and then we'll come back after that.
So one of the things we wanted to point out too is we took the valve cover off of this, and you can see that there's not clumps of oil in here. So the only oil changes on this Jeep are always, they seem to be current. The vehicle's neglected, and the previous owner might have went over on oil changes. You may see a bunch of clumps in here of all burnt oil. That's kind of a sign that they went a little too far between oil changes, and you know, you want to get all that out of there if there's clumps of oil in there. You can usually use like a vacuum or something like that to vacuum it all out. So what we're doing with these inserts right here is we're wire wheeling them out so they're nice and clean. Like that, to be nice and clean like this. Get everything off. All right, we got Rich wiping down the valve cover. I cleaned up all your inserts, so you're all set on those. Got a crud off it.
Show them this. So we clamped some vice grips onto the one stud that came off with the plastic bracket, and we're going to crack the 7/16 loose now. Okay. We're going to pull that off. Now, I have the cover here that we took off, the plastic cover, and I put the new tie wraps into it. So the harness is going to go in here. When I go to slip this back on, it'll be all set to just set the wire harness in place and then tie it off. So we're going to clean this up as well.
And then here are all the inserts that I just wire wheeled. I was showing you a second ago. They're nice and clean and get all the gunk off them.
These are the rubbers. We're going to sit down into the valve cover. We'll show you that. After you press these into the valve cover hole, then we push the steel sleeves down inside these. But we insert these in the valve cover first. All right, so we got the rubbers here. We're gonna put these into the valve cover. Now we've cleaned the valve cover. We've cleaned all of our metal plates here. Once you put the rubber grommet in, you just sit this in and you push it down with your thumb. You have to put the rubber in first. And cleaning the valve cover, cleaning the cylinder head up nice in the area, and cleaning all these took about 40 minutes to get everything clean. So, you know, figure that into your time.
So you're just gonna insert these all the way around the perimeter of the valve cover, and once we get that done, we'll be back in a minute.
All right, so we've spent about 40 minutes cleaning up the cylinder head here, the surface for the gasket. It's all nice and clean. You gave it a quick brake clean on this side. If you have access to a pressure washer before you start this job, it's probably a good idea to do it because we spent some time cleaning up the valve cover and cleaning this all up. That would save us some time. So our gasket only goes on one way. It's got the holes in here. So we're going to sit this down in place. Move the harness out of the way. Line up your studs here. That's down. Line up this one. Okay. It's fall down in place. We put it on dry. That you don't have to put grease on it. You don't have to put any sealer on it. On our valve cover over here, we've got all of our grommets put in place. Then we slid all of our sleeves down. We took time to wire wheel them. If you pressure wash this off, this will probably save you some time. We have our 2 tie wraps put into our plastic harness holder here that goes on the back of the valve cover. We put the tie wraps in place first. So now once we sit this in place, we can just, you know, tie wraps are already in there. So we're gonna grab the valve cover and we're gonna sit this down in place. And remember, we have to take the valve cover and we have to slide it in on an angle to get this to go in. So okay, it's down in place. Now we're going to catch all of our studs. We had our paint marks on here. All of the ones in the back were all studs up to about here. And we have 2 on the other side. And the 2 on the other side, the heat shield has been removed, so it really doesn't matter on the other side because there is no more aluminum heat shield. So we're going to get all these bolts started, and then we'll show you how we snug them down. We're just going to hand start every one of these. No, we don't want to drop the socket. All right, we're just going to start all of these by hand to make sure that they start good. And we can tighten them down with the little air ratchet. All right, so we have all the bolts caught except for the last one. Now this one is opposite of the one in the front here. So I have it on the little short extension, the deep 7/16 socket, and I'm gonna sneak this around the back of the harness and get it down in place. All of these have been started by hand. Nothing's been tight. You don't tighten anything until you get them all started. And then we'll snug these things up with the air ratchet so that they just ran down, and our final tightening will be by hand. You don't wanna crank these things, you know, too much. So we're gonna push back on the harness here because it's all flexible. So I have options here, and I'm gonna run my hand down in the back side here and find the hole. You really can't get in here to see. Kind of crappy. Just gotta make sure you don't cross thread this one. This is the most difficult one in the job. I'm gonna get the little quarter drive ratchet while I'm in here. And I'm gonna try and snug this one up first. Okay, it's snug. I'm gonna end up coming back to it again to do a final torque. And now I can use the air ratchet to run these things down. And it's just a quarter drive air ratchet. So we're not gonna over tighten these. And you can start with the middle and kind of work your way around here. Once Once I get some resistance, I'm gonna stop because I'm gonna hand tighten them all. One more on the back side over here, which we use the short one for. And we got a few in the front to get. And then we're gonna hand tighten everything. All right, now we're gonna go and hand tighten. Start up front, work our way back. And like I said, you're just getting a little snug on it. You don't have to torque, really crank them down. These steel sleeves that we put in only let you tighten it up so far. I like to stagger back and forth. All right, we're going to change our extension and do the two ones in the rear, and make sure that these are all good, tight. And after I get these tight, I'm just gonna run my way up there just to make sure that we caught every single one of them. So we can set our cover, our electrical harness connector, the injector harness plastic cover back in place. We'll lock them down onto the studs. And so we'll disconnect our bungee cord. Like that. And like I said, there is no heat shield. Normally there's an aluminum heat shield in here that you would have to deal with. And when you do have one, I usually just fold the tabs back up out of the way, and I would pull the heat shield tight to the bottom of these, and when I pull this all over, it comes up out of the way so you have just as much access. So we want to sit this down in place and line these all up. And this is all plastic. These things are getting older, they're kind of brittle, so we need to make sure that we don't break anything. And I'm just going to take a small plastic hammer and tap down on them and make sure that these are all bottom. If I can push them down, looks like they're all down. I'll give them a little quick tap and make sure, and then we can start reassembling this side. Okay. Bottom. Alright, that's bottom. We can take our vacuum hose over here. Make sure that this doesn't split. This is a main vacuum for the engine. Push that down into place. And we've got this side back together now. All right, so we got one of these things is a little broken here, so we got a little washer. We're just gonna sit down on it, and it's gonna grab it a little bit. It ain't gonna do too much, but makes us feel a little better, so. I tighten this up, and these are 7/16. Snug this up. Got our little ratchet here. I'm just giving it a little snug. You don't want to crank down on it because you can break the plastic even more. Yeah, that's enough there. Okay, now we're gonna tighten our tie wraps. We got in place. This is sitting in there, that's tight. Okay, that's tight, this ain't moving anywhere. That's good. So we're gonna cut the tie wrap here and put our hoses back in place. Tuck our hoses over here. We got this goes onto this sleeve right here, and then the hoses just clip back into place right there. Let's see here. Okay, normally on some of the other Jeeps that I've seen, there's a ground cable that goes from the firewall here. This one's broken, and it ran over to one of the studs over here. That is not on this Jeep for some reason. The last one I did, it was there, but this one is broken, and it's not going to do actually too much, so we're not worrying about it. We've got our cables here. We're going to take the bungee cord off, and we're going to set our cables back in place. We've got these go back down to line up for the studs that we took off. And there's a clip right here on the valve cover that these two pop into right here. Now these things get pretty brittle, so you got to be careful when you take these off that you don't go busting them, because they're going to hold your cables in place, and they are important. So. There. We had this clip that we had removed. It goes like this. It's the same thing. You can hear them pushing down. The cable locks into this one here. Right there. Okay. Okay. That should have a little space in there. And we have the two 10mm bolts for our bracket here. We can clip all of these on afterwards. We'll get our bolts in place. And that one. And these are the 10mm ones. And we can snug them down with the quarter drive ratchet now. There's 3 bolts left. We have 2 of them on this bracket, the short ones. And then we have one left that holds the air cleaner back down. So, just snugging these up. can pop this one on. Make sure that this locks into the clips here. And then this one slides on the outside here. And you can pull the lever back a little bit to help you get it on. You want to hear them clip like that. And it's the same thing with this one here. Okay, heard them all snap on. Now we're gonna put our air cleaner back on this. We're gonna put a little bit of grease on this to help this slide down, and we have one 10mm bolt left that's gonna go down into this bracket here to hold the air cleaner on. All right, so we have our, on this side, the dipstick to put back in, and get that in, and we've got our brackets back on, tight. That one's tight. We have our bolts tightened down over here for the bracket here for the linkage, accelerator pedal, and the shift transmission shift cable. We put a little thin coat of grease on this boot here so that our air cleaner just slides down nice and easy. And we got a 5/16 bolt from the back side here that we're going to tighten up over here and lock the air cleaner back down. And that's pretty much going to finish this one up. Just by putting the grease on it, this should help us get this thing to drop down. Okay, that's back down in place. We can line up our bolt here. Snug this one up. It's another 10mm. Okay, that's tight. We're going to line these up, get our clips on, and then we'll tighten a couple of 5/16 worm clamps, and then we're ready to fire this thing off. Okay, we got one 5/16 clamp here. We're going to make sure it's tight, and we got the one on the back side. Tony will show us the back side over there.
The one on the back side is right there.
Make sure this one's tight. Got a hose to slip on. Okay, all good. We don't have any spare pieces. We're going to fire this thing off and make sure it runs good. Alright, runs good. We're just going to take a quick look, make sure there's no leaks from the valve cover.
Thanks for watching the video. If you have any questions, leave a comment. I will reply back to you. Give the video a thumbs up if you liked it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching.